welcome. I'm Menaka Doshi. You're watching a special edition of Prime Time in which we're about to tell you in great detail how Mumbai city is all set to change thanks to a new development plan.
And my name is Aayush Ailawadi. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Mumbai City has a new development plan 2034 that hopes to build 10 lakh new affordable homes and increase the floor space index for both commercial and residential construction. But what about additional infrastructure?
The Indian rupee weakens to a fresh 14-month low against the dollar. The Nifty drops below 10,600 as commodity stocks struggle.
Fortis Healthcare says Manipal's new offer imposes onerous conditions that would limit the scope for competitive bidding.
Bharti Infratel will merge with Indus Towers, creating the largest telecom tower operator outside of China.
Wipro's fourth quarter profit declines on a write-off for an insolvent client and an impairment loss on one of its acquisitions.
All right, those are all of the top business stories of the day. But today we're actually going to move away from business, markets and the economy to talk to you about one of the most important situations facing this city, and that is of development. The world's second most crowded city is likely to potentially get more crowded. The Maharashtra government has approved the Mumbai Development Plan 2034 today, or 2034, however you say it. Now, this document will determine Mumbai's land use and infrastructure development for the next 2 decades. Aayush and Purva are both standing by to summarize for all of us the highlights of this Mumbai Development Plan 2034 as presented by the BMC this afternoon to a group of journalists. Purva, you want to go it first, or Aayush? Sorry.
Absolutely, Menaka. Thanks so much. So let's start off with the key objectives of this plan that Menaka was talking about. The Municipal Commissioner outlined the key objectives at a press conference that Purva attended earlier today. Now, one of the top objectives is 1 million affordable homes that will be built according to the development plan. Now, that's not all. The plan actually aims to create 8 million jobs by the year 2034. Now, it's not just housing, because the plan also aims to conserve open spaces. There's been no compromises made there. All of these places will be marked as no construction areas. But Purva, a lot of this has come at the cost of freeing up land in no development zones, hasn't it?
Yes, that's right, Ayush. So the DP 2034 also proposes unlocking of the no development zone. So earlier the areas which were under the no development zone are now being classified as the special development zone. So about 3,355 hectares of land from the no development zone would now be freed for affordable housing, out of which about 2,100 of hectares has been earmarked for the affordable housing. And to add to this, just add another 300 hectares of salt pan lands. Now remember, the developers were trying very hard to push to unlock the salt pan lands, and now this has been unlocked as well. And so Ayush, this is like a major massive push for the affordable housing segment in the city. But we will have to see how much affordability that will bring, considering Mumbai real estate is you know, one of the costliest real estate in the country.
Right.
But not only that, there are other highlights from the press conference was the increase in the FSI.
Right. No, absolutely, Purva, because the increase in FSI is something that developers have been demanding for a long time. But what does this mean? Does this mean vertical development in the island city? Well, earlier there was a call, of course, to have a uniform permissible FSI at one particular figure that they had fixed. But now it hasn't panned out that way when it comes to the Development Plan 2034. It's going to be split as island city and the suburbs. Originally, it was obviously 1.33 in the island city. It's going to go up to 3 in residential, and in the suburbs, it's going to go up from 2 to 2.5. But that's only, of course, in residential. When we're talking about commercial, well, it's a different story. In the island city now, there's again a discrepancy there from 1.3 all the way up to 5. And of course, in the suburbs, from 2.5, we're going to see it going up all the way to 5. Purva, that's not all, right? According to the development plan, there is a lot of talk of green zones. Now, we know the environmentalists have been talking about the green lungs of the city and preserving the green lungs of the city. There is talk of the green zones in this particular development plan.
Yes, so we always talk about this affordable housing and increase of FSI, but another key portion of the development plan is on the emphasis on the green zone. So about 12,000 hectares, 12,800 hectares has been earmarked as the natural areas. So by this, it means that there will be no construction on these natural areas. And the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is in Borivali, now this will be free of encroachment. So here, this is also earmarked as a natural area. Other natural areas are your mangroves and some part of the film city. However, one key point to note here is that the controversial metro car shed, which was proposed at the RA forest, now there hasn't been any change to that. The construction of the car metro shed would take place. However, other than that, RA would be left as a forest zone and there will be no construction. And the other provisions in this is like obviously the open spaces where you will have more playgrounds, schools, colleges, then also old age homes, then emphasis on fine arts. So yeah, those are some of the other key provisions which are in the DP.
All right, now of course we must note that this is all based on the press conference earlier today. We don't have the fine print. That's not out yet when it comes to the Development Plan 2034. But Menaka, there are some key concerns. The big concerns are, the first one being, is the enabling infrastructure in place? Considering we're talking about vertical development, we're going to talk about so much more reclamation, urbanization, development. Is the supporting infrastructure in place? That's not all. The environmental impact, that is a key concern, considering the use of fly ash will now be permitted, and of course the construction on soil pan land. So that's of course another concern. We also have, of course, the construction in RA colony given the stamp of approval that Pura was talking about as well. The key question, Menaka, is will this lead to more congestion in Maximum City?
All right, so the words development plan should mean there's development, but it comes with a plan. And let's test whether this DP 2034, whatever we know of it, actually does have both those elements in it or not. To discuss the implications, we're joined this evening by a whole host of experts, urban planners, environmentalists, activists, and of course also builders. So let me introduce them. Urban expert and environmentalist Rishi Agarwal joins us today. Professor Ronita Bardhan of the Center of Urban Science and Engineering, joining us from California through Skype. Pankaj Joshi, the Executive Director of the Urban Design Research Institute, or the UDRI, very well known in Mumbai City. We're also joined by two builders this evening, Rohit Poddar, the Managing Director of Poddar Housing, and Mayur Shah of Marathon Nextgen Realty, joining us. We also hope to be joined by Nitin Karir, the Urban Development Secretary of the State of Maharashtra, who hopefully will help us understand more facets to this Development Plan 2034. So to all our guests, a very warm welcome. I'd like to start first by trying to get a comment in from Mr. Karir, if we have him already, and that is that, sir, it is an ambitious plan. You've set the goal there of creating more jobs, of creating more affordable homes. But what we couldn't get from you all this afternoon in that press conference is what is the accompanying infrastructure that is going to help make all of this viable and sustainable. Can you talk us through what else you have planned under this DP?
I mean, that's really two questions into one, because one, you are talking about the infrastructure, and two is about all the other things. So let's look at the infrastructure part first. Every development plan document has two or three big things. One is about the reservation. The second is about the zoning and what is the type of development that is going to happen. And third is essentially about the infrastructure and the way that it is going to be planned, and what are the type of money and where that money is going to come from. So all these things are part of the development plan document already, and therefore if one goes to this is all part of the planning process. So where the money is going to come from the development charges, from the other premiums, and how it is going to be used to boost the infrastructure for the capital expenditure, all those things are already mentioned. And in any case, any enhancements of the FARs, FSIs, are always need to be accompanied by a direct increase in the infrastructure. So all that is part of the document already.
All right. But Mr. Curry, I must confess that when I first read the headlines, which is that more land freed up for affordable housing and the FSI increased quite substantially for commercial spaces as well in the island city, my first question was that, the supporting infrastructure, the roads, the sanitation, the water supply, the healthcare, the access to emergency services, shouldn't have that been announced, described and detailed alongside the construction aspect of this DP?
They are all described in great detail in the development plan document. So if you go through, because it's a large document,
right,
and we are talking about announcing the salient features. So those features get announced in the press con, but the document itself has all these things already written into it.
Sure, I understand that. But unfortunately, since it's not yet public, can you help us understand at least some of the key features?
Sorry, the document is public already because the development plan document was already published first under Section 26 of the Act and later on with modifications under Section 30 when it was sent to the government. So all those things are already in the public domain.
Sure. Can you share some highlights then for us? There should be no... Okay.
It's only the changes that happen in those documents. Those are the ones which get approved by the government. But the rest of, all these things already. So in terms of linking the FSI to the road width, that's an essential change that has happened from the previous times where FSIs were given irrespective of the road width. Okay. So now understanding that the moment you gave more FSI, you are going to have more density and more vehicles. Therefore, you need to be on wider roads. So a direct correlation has been brought in.
Okay.
So things like that have already been worked into the plan.
All right. Could you also tell us whether this more FSI is uniformly available to everybody, or there will be classifications for those, or categorizations for those who can avail of it for both the island city, the suburban city, for residential and commercial?
It's all linked to the, essentially it is all linked to the road width. So wherever you have road width, you will get higher FSI. So, right, okay. There's a table there, and based on the table, you will get more FSIs. Obviously, there will be little more FSI available in the island city than in the suburbs. That is dependent on the infrastructure which is existing.
Okay.
And the moment more infrastructure can be brought in, FARs can be enhanced in other areas also.
Okay, great, sir. One more question. Water, waste, commuting, transportation, all of this has been envisaged in the DP. Can you take us through the key highlights that will help this city develop in a planned fashion?
The wastewater treatment plants, the sewage treatment plants, the water supply enhancements, all these are essentially already mentioned there. So, depending on the population projections, so not only do we plan for the amenities in terms of schools and hospitals and gardens and playgrounds, but we also plan in terms of the infrastructure that needs to be provided in terms of water treatment plants, in terms of water pipes, in terms of the sewage treatment plants, in terms of the water inflow and outflow essentially, as well as the additional roads such as the coastal highway or the sea link or the central island freeway. So all these things also get planned and they are already part of this document.
All right, so do stay on the line with us. We do have several, urban planning experts joining us to talk about, what they make of the salient features of the DP, and also if they have any particular questions to you that could help clarify some aspects of this. Rishi, you're here with us. What struck you the most about this? Do you feel that this time round we're doing it in a better fashion than we were? The last DP had become so controversial.
So, see, I think we need to also look at a 30-year time frame. In 1991, unfortunately, the FSI was frozen at an artificially low level. And those were the booming years for Mumbai, the 90s and the 2000s, when we needed additional FSI for a lot of various needs, commercial, residential. And that's the time we didn't have it. And we've had all kind of contortions built into it. The slum FSI coming in and all of that, and now suddenly, now suddenly there's a whole huge lot of FSI which has been unleashed, and I'm not really sure how this will pan out. And the numbers don't seem to add up. The DP document says that we are planning for almost 20 square meter per capita, which means that the apartment sizes should actually go up. But if you've been seeing the papers recently, we are celebrating 189 square feet or 300 square feet apartments and how people live lives in them. So somehow it almost seems that there'll be huge burst of additional units coming up, whereas the livability of the city, we might just be building a lot of additional vertical slums. Also, I want to highlight that the salt pans being released is really an awful step, I think.
Okay.
If you've been
Before we get to the salt pans, let's stick with the FSI and let's see if we can get some thoughts on FSI itself.
So the one point is that we are not also looking at how this will integrate with the regional plan.
Okay.
The Mumbai Trans-Harbour link will come up in 2025, I think.
Right.
And you'll have 10,000 hectares being unleashed on the other side. Within 30 minutes, somebody can reach the Midland district by 2025 or 26. So what does that mean? Because you're going to unleash so much. The Navi Mumbai airport will be functional. The Navi Mumbai airport influence area, Naina, will be operational. So I think the whole region and how we integrate Mumbai's development plan with the regional plan, I don't think is sufficiently been looked at.
Okay, we're also joined by Ronita Bardhan, Center for Urban Science and Engineering, joining us from California. Very early morning to you, Ronita. You know, what, just to specifically touch upon the FSI issue before we get into some of the others, when you see an almost doubling of commercial FSI in the city, are you alarmed or do you believe it's well deserved? Because there are different views on this. I think some people believe that for a commercial capital, we don't have enough, you know, allocation towards commercial real estate, and others believe that no, it's already very crowded. There is of course the other development view that the only way the city can grow, whether it's the island city or the suburban city, is vertical.
Yeah, I believe this has been an advanced planning, and we have to see as it is rightly pointed out that there needs a development and advanced planning is required. We are seeing a time frame of 2030, 2050 perhaps in certain cases. So we are going to see a huge amount of migration. We're going to fill a lot of gaps in terms of housing deficit, which requires a higher FSI. And this is not the first city in the world that is actually facing a higher FSI phenomena. And it is very much required in the sense that in order to accommodate close the housing deficit, we need either go vertical up, which most of the cities have done. If you see across the developing world, we have done that. And the only thing which I like to point out is that a little bit of more consideration, more detailed level of maybe in terms of regulation, in regulating the quality of life of these housing units that will be coming up. Definitely there will be advancement in planning, so you're not going to see a very 2,000 square feet of housing coming up in the next 20-30 years. It will probably be smaller units with smaller family size and smaller people size of the housing units coming up. And I feel it's a positive thing for the city in order to accommodate the growth and economic growth that India currently requires, and Mumbai being a spearhead in that, it is very much important. And moreover, I feel that there is a little bit of lacuna which I want to point out is in the regulation of the building guidelines in terms of ensuring, at least numerically ensuring that there is adequate daylight, adequate ventilation, and which kind of confirms the efficiency of these housing, which is yet a kind of a blind spot. And I don't blame it in that sense that it is yet a blind spot and it will going to remain a blind spot. There have been positive discussions with the main stakeholders in the housing policy that they are going to take positive steps towards ensuring that the future housing units that are going to come up with this additional FSI that has been sanctioned through the DP are going to be at least livable enough, and that's what I think is mainly required. Increasing of FSI is just a tool to accommodate more housing. It's not densification. It's a positive densification if it is associated with a positive regulatory guidelines which ensures livability.
All right, great. Let's get the two builders to comment in on this information that was given to us by the Urban Development Secretary Nitin Kareed, which is to say that the additional FSI will be linked to road width. And Mayur Shah, let me get a quick comment in from you on that. Do you see potential for a lot of redevelopment on the basis of this additional FSI, or how do you see this additional FSI being put to use?
Yeah, if you look at the road width criteria, which is I think used across India everywhere, wherever higher FSI is used, the road width should be more. So we really welcome that criteria. And when you are saying that increase in FSI and densification, most of the Mumbai and Mumbai suburbs is already developed. So it is basically we are going through an urban renewal or most of the redevelopment projects. And there are also this additional FSI up to 2 in suburb was already available. So the 0.5 extra is only coming on a larger 30-meter wide road. So I think it's not too many things, too much of the development which is going to come in 2.5.
Enough. Rohit, Poddar, we're going from 1.3 in the island city to 3 for residential projects and 5 for commercial projects. Even in suburban Mumbai, you're going from 2.5 to 5 for commercial projects. Should we expect as citizens a burst in construction and redevelopment activity?
Well, I mean, if you look at the FSI norms globally in large metropolises, I mean, I think finally we have somewhat parity with them. It's not necessary that there'll be some crazy amount of FSI coming up, but it's important to note that certain projects aren't viable unless the FSI norms are basically raised, and this will enable those projects to become, commercially viable. Also, the important thing is in Mumbai, we've been losing an index of competitiveness because the prices have been expensive, and if FSI norms basically go up, I think prices will naturally be amortized, land prices will be amortized over the higher FSI. And hence, in the medium term, you'll have more commercial stock coming up, and prices should actually start coming down, which will actually, lead to more people coming into the city for activities that we've been losing out to the other metros in India, for the same.
Okay. I think one of the studies I was reading, Rishi, and give me your comment on this, it said an increase in FSI by 1 implies that the entire footprint of the city has been doubled. I don't know if that's the right way to calculate it. Hence, there should be a subsequent doubling of open spaces, healthcare, education, water supply, sanitation facilities. Is that how you would measure the accompanying infrastructure that needs to come in if you're, sort of increasing FSI? And do you see that happening under this DP more critically?
See, if you just look at the open space, 0.03 acres per 1,000 people, and the national average is 4 acres per 1,000 people.
Right.
Now, the past DP itself has completely failed in being able to acquire amenity plots, being able to acquire open spaces. So there is no reason to believe that suddenly something will change and the ability of the administration to get more space will increase. And so having said that, yes, the pressure will definitely go up on something like open space. And that is one of the most critical, because water, frankly speaking, is quite well taken care for Mumbai. And if you put in additional...
But how would increased FSI take away open space? You're building vertically, right, then?
No, but what Rohit was just pointing out, that, I mean, if additional FSI leads to prices going down, which means that suddenly people, instead of deciding to go to an NCR, say that, oh, Mumbai suddenly become affordable, we can get houses for 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs. You have more people coming into Mumbai.
Okay.
Which means that more people coming in, but your ability to increase. And see, even when we talk about green spaces, Sanjay Gandhi National Park is not accessible. Yeah. Mangroves are not accessible. They provide great ecosystem services, but nobody can walk through them. Which means that already Mumbai, that whole feeling of being super congested. And when you go to NCR, you're like, oh wow, I have arm's length thing. So my worry is that we might just end up being in a situation where Mumbai starts feeling more congested, more and more congested. Just imagine the Midland area where we are right now.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was really the next thing we were going to talk about. Ayush and I spent time, cribbing about working in Lower Parel every day, as does everybody else in this office. I'm sure your commute here was not easy either.
Not at all, not at all. So all of these things will add up.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
It's an exceptional day for you then.
It's a good time you came in as well. Rishi, but I want to get your take on that as well.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about increased pressure on the mainland and this city, shouldn't the talk really be, when you're talking about a development plan, also about perhaps, developing the areas around the circumference, or perhaps satellite towns and cities, or pushing, a certain amount of funds and projects out there? Shouldn't that be the talk then, considering if we're talking about a situation where there's more congestion in this city? Shouldn't we be developing on the circumference and the outskirts?
Absolutely, and that's what I said right in the beginning, that if you're looking at Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link becoming operational in 2025, 2026, then ideally you should have pushed some of this higher FSI across the harbour and in much more better planned way, and you would have had a greenland development or a greenfield development. Out here it's brownfield, which is always so messy, and we know what are the whole complications around. Island City itself has, I think, all these old cess buildings. which we're not able to do. I mean, we've been talking about cluster-based redevelopment. And then Dharavi itself, 500 acres, we've not been able to follow up with that plan. So there are a lot of these plans which have been in talks for 10 years, 20 years. And frankly, the quality of administration is really poor. I feel that we don't anywhere bring the kind of sophistication which is available to metros around the world, a Shanghai or a New York or a Singapore. Our institutions are really in bad shape. Sometimes the development plan almost looks like a privately held real estate company's 20-year development plan rather than a city's development plan. So that's the way I think I look at it. And these are points of big concern. The quality of administration being really the big thing. It's not just how you use the land, but the quality of administration, which is really an intangible, which is not so tangible as land and FSI and vertical towers, etc. And the quality of administration in terms of institutions which can manage traffic, institutions which can manage vehicular growth. Of course, we're going to have metro coming in, which is going to add a lot of public transport capacity. But things like walkability, I mean, just simple things like crossing the road or moving around in the city, is it easy? No, I don't think it is. So those are the points.
Just tell me, I'm curious about this, Rohit. I saw you nodding with, and agreeing with some of the things that Rishi said. Do you think that, more of Mumbai will look like Lower Parel? Beautiful, fabulous, tall buildings, but, access is so difficult.
In my view, mass urban transport really drives any metropolis. So, I mean, if you look at London, for example, as a city, we all talk about the livability quotient of it. It's very expensive living in the middle of London, but you have a fantastic tube system that actually brings you in and you can commute perfectly well without having a car. So I think Mumbai's solution, in my opinion, lies on basically mass urban transportation being fantastic. Now, will the metro deliver that? We have to basically wait and see. We're sort of behind schedule as far as the monorail is concerned, so we don't really have tremendous confidence from the past in terms of what will happen. But based on the plans that have been put in place, I think the metro can be a game changer. I mean, there's as much lines being laid for the metro as we have in the train lines, right? So it's a massive push towards infrastructure. So, I mean, whatever, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, buildings aren't going to sprout up in one day. Buildings will take time for the plans to get approved and also for buildings to come up. I mean, on another note, in my opinion, with the higher FSI, you may actually have decongestion taking place. So for example, let's say you have parts of the city now which have very narrow roads, right? I think the cluster scheme, if they can actually be pushed in those areas with a higher FSI norm as an example, you have setback norms for buildings, right? So maybe a certain small plot can't be developed because it's just, with the setbacks, you can't really make a building. But if you have 10 or 15 to 20 buildings coming up, in say Kalba Devi, for example, the roads can also become wider. We worry about, we all have kids, right? So we worry about.
We did remaking of Mumbai Federation that happened.
So I'm just saying that,
we've discussed this, the Bindi Bazaar redevelopment, the Dharavi redevelopment, and unfortunately, at least as per what I know, none of them seem to have taken off in any substantive fashion so far at all.
I think Dharavi is a different subject, to be honest with you, because we're looking at a lot of people gainfully employed in that area. It's a big economy. It's $1 billion economy, right? So I think that's got its own stresses and its own sort of views, its own sort of.
Okay, so we'll leave that out of conversation.
Exactly. So, but I think the other one, I think the cluster, really speaking, you have to speed up cluster and have possibly single window clearance.
Now, and I don't think it's moved. I'll bring Mayur into this conversation for just one last question I had on this FSI issue. Mayur, will the price of houses actually go down because of this higher FSI, especially in the island city and in the suburban areas? So do you envisage it becoming cheaper to be able to buy a home, let's say in Bandra, Santa Cruz, or Mahim, Worli, any parts of South Mumbai?
See, I think we have to go into the fine print, because whenever they are talking about the higher FSI, there is a linked premium to be paid for getting this higher FSI. And as at CREDA MCHI, we've been pushing, these premiums are quite high because the land prices are quite high of a ready reckoner rate, and 60 to 80% premiums on the additional FSI really brings the cost quite high. And the input cost in Mumbai is not coming down, construction, labor, everything. So, bringing affordability back into the city, I have my questions. By increasing FSI, you will not be able to bring the affordability into the city, because you will have to go taller. You will have to build, the cost of those tall buildings are much higher. All firefighting, all safety norms will bring more cost into those tall buildings.
Okay, one of the key salient features you were, putting out there of the plan was also, I think, 10 lakh new affordable homes, right? That really is the second point to make in this entire debate, which is the opening up of non-development zones, almost 3,500 hectares of non-development zone land that will now be allocated in some fashion to affordable housing.
Absolutely, Menaka, and I want to get Rishi in on that as well, because a lot of that was originally designated for some sort of tourism purposes as well. There's a big difference from the original development plan in this one, right? The original one spoke about it from a different lens. Over here, we're talking about using salt pan land and stuff like that. And there are environmental concerns as well, Rishi.
Absolutely. If you've been following the news in the past 2-3 days, big concerns are being raised on the global warming climate change front in terms of what's happening with the ice sheets in Antarctica and how they're rapidly melting at a much rapid rate than we previously envisaged. So possibly we'll have a 1 meter sea level rise happening a lot sooner than the end of the century. And in that case, the development plan really leads to look into all of this. Also the fact that with climate change happening, you're looking at extreme weather events happening, the frequency increasing, which means we've already seen a 2005 floods in Mumbai. And we know that areas where there were mangroves and salt pans were spared from the brunt of flooding. But now if you're going to start constructing in those salt pan lands, and this is, I keep reminding people of the Archimedes principle. When Archimedes sat in the bathtub, that much amount of water was displaced. So when you're going to sit in the salt pan, that much amount of water is going to be displaced, right? You're going to take away the capacity of that land to absorb that. So this is, I think, a big concern. The NDZ areas, and like I said, I mean, if you're going to look at a regional plan, if you're going to put your transport linkages, then you have Naina coming up, you're having MTHL cross harbour, then why are you playing around with the salt pan lands at all?
Okay, so let me put the same question to Ronita. Ronita, what's your view on freeing up, land from these no development zones towards affordable housing, including land from the salt pans?
Yeah, it has. What I feel is it is at one hand it is required because we in Mumbai we really are land scarcities there, and there is not the first time that there are tools that are being used to free up lands for housing and closing the housing deficit. We have this SRA scheme, that is slum rehabilitation policies, which actually look at freeing up premium lands, which can not only close the housing deficit but also give a boost to the GDP. It is also, but when you come to these eco-sensitive zones where there is a symbiotic relationship between these ecological surfaces, where it is required to have a sensitive planning, I think that is why perhaps certain areas which are like high eco-sensitive areas, they have been actually left untouched, and they are called no development zones. But there are certain areas which probably with sensitive planning could be could make way for better housing land or putting. But my concern is when you one aspect is that freeing up the land and opening it up for housing, but then there should be very strict norms in terms of how environmental clearances are given, how the housing itself in terms of structural or the livability quotient of these housing that will be built on these salt pans, these should be very strictly regulated, very stringent norms, and they should be regulated at a very regular intervals. Not only that, there should be an efficiency mapping of these lands before even allowing them for even putting a single brick for construction. So I don't find any fault in opening up certain no development zones for development, because that's what is required in planning, and that's what we do for planning. Otherwise, you are just readjusting land use within the city, and that's not called development plan. There is no development in that. But a development plan requires this kind of readjustments, and it requires opening up of certain lands which are potential land for accommodating future growth, in terms of economic, in terms of social. But I feel there should be a sensitivity analysis in terms of how well the plans need to be executed. There should be very stringent checks in terms of giving clearances and certificates. If these are done through a special purpose vehicle, if there are very strict norms in terms of livability quotient, these become tool for making developing these kind of lands in a very eco-sensitive manner. So you do have your housing, and as well as you do not disturb your nature, and there's a balance. So there are so it is not exactly that you can't have a vertical city and it will all be hyper dense and it will all be congested. It's not like that. You can have a very compact city, which is probably the best
Ronita,
model
I'm
for
going to briefly
future
interrupt you there.
development.
I'm going to briefly interrupt you there because I know Rishi
Yeah.
has a point to make. Is it a counterpoint?
So I just wanted a counterpoint to what Ronita was saying, that this looks all very textbook perfect. But just two disasters in the past 6 to 8 months, the Kamla Mill disaster and the Elphinstone disaster, have shown how bad we are in terms of implementing a lot of these things and how our sensitivity is so skewed. And there's a complete lack of compassion. Almost there's a certain barbaricness to the way the city is run. So I'm very doubtful if all these small checks and balances, checklists, all of these are going to be maintained, ventilation and a lot of those.
You're saying they're a lot better on paper, but perhaps not.
The implementation, our record with implementation has really been quite poor. And I'm highlighting these are...
it now becomes the liability of the builder as well, I would imagine. I don't think you can get away with any kind of rampant building in that sense. So when you think of salt pan lands, you think of opportunity, or you think of difficulty and challenge?
I mean, there are two parts of it, okay? I mean, on one side, I believe that if you have land available, it should be used for affordable housing, because people can't live 2 hours away from their work, right? And these lands do exist. Yeah. But I actually share Rishi's view that basically if you have a buffer, I mean, if it's an island, right? So you have sea on the Arabian Sea on all 4 sides. So I have not conducted an analysis, and I'm no marine expert or analysis expert on how much water we can absorb. But theoretically speaking, whatever the mangrove zone absorb, it comes into the salt pan land. So I mean, obviously they've been doing this.
But do we know which part of this node development? I think one of the concerns I had was also that, and with some of the urban planners I was talking to also, is that it's not really very clear which portions of the node development zones are being allocated towards affordable housing.
I'm sure
where are you going to be building? Like, for instance, one of the questions that comes up incumbent to that is, are you going to build affordable housings at the extremes of suburban Mumbai? And where are those people then going to find jobs? For instance, if you're hoping to reduce the slum area in Mumbai proper by helping these people relocate to affordable homes, in the periphery, where are their jobs going to be?
So I mean, from my understanding, so Mumbai doesn't have jobs only in Mumbai. I mean, you have micro markets with large jobs, right? You have Thane, you've got Vasai Virar, Kalyan, you've got.
Yes, but a lot of people who live in the slums in Mumbai actually, are in service industries and professions from within, in and around, South Mumbai or the island city or northern Mumbai.
So I don't think the plan was actually to rehouse people who are actually living in slums to the salt pan lands. The rule for SRA is to rehouse people in situ. So that means you have to build tenements for them, a vertical structure rather than a horizontal structure within that plot.
No, the limited point I'm making, I'm not suggesting that they're going to en masse move people. I'm just saying the reason we've seen, the development of slums the way it has in and around Mumbai has been because the economic opportunity lies within the city. So if your no development zones, for instance, is this going to be at the periphery of Gorey Beach, is what one of the people asked me, saying, is that some portion of the land that has been freed up for affordable housing? My question is, that location of that affordable home, is going to be critical, right? Because if you don't have economic opportunity around that, you're really not going to solve the problem of congestion in Mumbai by creating housing outside, right?
No, actually you can. I mean, first of all, no one knows where these pieces of land will actually be until we have, more clarity. But assuming it's in the island city of Mumbai, you have mass urban transport, which is the train services, right? Which is the Western Central and the Harbour Line, and of course the metro's coming up. So whenever you want to decongest the city, you have to use mass urban transport to take people out to the periphery and then bring them back in for work and using high-speed transportation. It's done all over the world. So it depends on
I love how you make it sound. I wonder if
No, but also we've observed in the past 10 years that the cities actually increasingly become polycentric. It's no longer people staying in Virar and working at Churchgate. You're having new business centers come up in Mindspace, in Chembur, and a lot of times people are staying within 4 to 5 kilometers.
This plan actually, if they do abide by all the environmental concerns that you have, then this is a good plan, because it does end up creating housing.
It has its own highlights, but I'm saying that's where the micromanagement, the quality of administration, if you're going to make your streets more walkable, put in more public transport, possibly with the densification, you'll have more people staying closer to where they work, and which is a very desirable feature. And what you mentioned, that you don't want people spending 2 hours of their life one way in going up and down. But so more housing stock might possibly help people relocate, and rental housing. I think that's the big thing which we're not doing in the city, which is a failure failure of Mahada, I think, because if you were to have high quality publicly provided rental housing, I mean, Singapore, we know 80% of the people are staying in public housing. So that's one place which we are not looking into in a big way, which is publicly provided high quality housing.
Okay, I think Ayush has a question, but before that, sorry, just before that, I want to put in one quick question to Mayur. Mayur, an Indian Express article suggested that civic records show that about 74% of the no development zone land to be unlocked for development is located in the Goregaon to Borivali belt in the western suburbs. If these are the areas that the affordable homes will come up, one might say that helps them be affordable, but do you think then that might be viable from an effort to try and take away the overcrowding problem that's happening in Mumbai?
So I agree with one of the view that the polycentricness is really happening, and these commercial office spaces are getting scattered all over Mumbai. And with a new culture of co-working spaces where, a lot of people are individually working in workstations, and those things are happening in Mulund suburb or Powai or Goregaon or Malad and all. And if you look at Mumbai, people are traveling from Kasara, Karjat, and all the way, where 2 hours and 2.5 hours of traveling. So the kind of distance which you are talking about of this Goregaon and Gorai is not, in my opinion, too much, because there can be commercial centers coming in half an hour circle. So creating affordable housing stock is a very good theme which this DP has taken. Okay, all the new NDZ land will be focusing only affordable housing, and that will bring a lot of livability, a nice, good living space for the budget homes.
What does new NDZ land mean? Sorry, I'm a little confused, because I know while the secretary said that all of this is in the public document, I didn't find all of this documentation out there of exactly what the zone earmarking is as per the revised approval or the revised, sort of government approval. Do you guys know what it is?
I haven't seen the final proposed one.
Yeah, because I think a couple of urban planners I spoke to said as yet the maps, the DCR and all are not made available. So it's not very easy to figure out, which specific plots of land that they're talking about. Do you have more knowledge of this?
I mean, we've seen drafts of it in the past, but I mean...
Drafts, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, the final ones haven't been published. I mean, this is just a notification which has come out now.
Yeah.
So I think over the next few days, you'll actually have it in the public domain. Then we'll actually know what it is. But just one quick point. There's no reason why you can't have affordable housing linked to affordable commercial spaces.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, for example, you can have a walk-to-work concept, right? So, say in the NDZ land area, just as an example from what Ravi was talking about, if you want to really create, pockets of employment, you can have affordable commercial spaces as well. You know what I'm saying to you? And there's no reason why that can't also be thought about. I mean, the plans have been made, of course, and they'll be published soon. But you can change them if there's a compelling reason to basically have. It's
interesting. Mayur was talking about Goregaon and Malad and those areas. In fact, the people actually commute from neighboring towns and cities are well connected by train and have a set journey, but actually getting to Malad even from here can take you a long time considering the congestion out there.
Rohit's betting on the metro to solve all of those problems.
Hopefully, and perhaps that's one of the main reasons that development works.
Even though we're behind time on it.
We are.
Yeah.
But Menaka, another key thing, which is what the political parties were really crying foul about also, was why has one of the largest landowners, the BPT, the Mumbai Port Trust. Why has that been excluded?
Yeah.
And why is there a special purpose
So
authority?
I think that the Chief Minister decided to create that as a special body that will, sort of take care of the development of the MPT on its own, and therefore it's not been brought under the aegis of the DP itself.
It's still complicated. BPT is still complicated because they're already saying that we are running operations in PPT, and it's not as if the whole land is lying empty. A lot of places are being used.
Also, I think because this is the state and central thing, right? The Mumbai Port Trust is the central thing, from what I can understand. It's not only state.
That's right.
So I'm not sure how exactly that's going to get developed. But it's a good point Ayush raises, that how do you plan or work on a development plan for a city without taking into account spaces like this?
Also the regional nature, right? If you're building the Mumbai Trans Harbour link, effectively everything across the harbour is part of Mumbai.
Right.
You'll take maybe 60 minutes to come from Virar to Midland district, but you might just take 30 minutes across the harbour. So while administratively it's not part of Mumbai, but because of the nature of high-speed transport, suddenly something, and that's what people talk about high-speed rail, right? If you have high-speed rail, potentially you could be staying in Lonavala or Pune, and within 1 hour be reaching Mumbai.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Rishi, the one more argument that I wanted to make, I know they've said Sanjay Gandhi Park continues to be the green zone or out of construction limits, but the metro shed, the car shed in RA,
It's an awful thing. I mean,
it just seems like no matter what the intensity of the protest, we can't change that.
It's
right?
fait accompli now. I think it's 2 years of agitation, 3 years of our lives wasted in doing all of this
not
agitation.
wasted, because I think it was a good fight. And
It was a good
that
fight,
deserves to be
but yeah, it deserves to be fought. I mean, that's a separate
How much
discussion.
sorry, go ahead, Aayush.
No, I mean, and just to
really sad.
paint an image for people watching, that's nearly 4 oval Maidans put together as the car shed. We've gone and shot there before.
Yeah.
That work has been going on. There was pending litigation, there were petitions. But the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation stand seems to be that this, and that it will be bolstered by the development plan if that's the case, that this is not dense forested area, and there is no documentation which actually proves that as well.
Yeah, so the fear is that in the next 10 to 15 years after the car shed is ready, the areas around it will start getting freed, or potentially real estate lobby will start eyeing those. And my fear from the environmental point of view is that the Mumbai airport will be much more at risk from flooding, because frankly speaking, that's my biggest point which I was fighting on, that the car shed is the lowest part in RA. So during monsoons, whenever you have 400 mm of rainfall, all the water kind of in this 70 acres settles down and then slowly releases into the Methi river. But now with all of this being concretized, you'll have all of this water gushing into the Methi. And the Mumbai airport is potentially, I think, more than terrorist attack, it is more at risk every monsoon from exacerbated flooding. So that would be brought on by our own selves.
Yeah, this is probably not a question, Rohit, you get asked often, but since we're all looking at the holistic development of this city, how much do we know about how they've been able to maintain the green spaces of the city in an untouched fashion? I was not able to find too much detail, at least in the approved version. I know that in earlier drafts and in the earlier version that came out 2-3 years ago, which was so severely opposed, there was worry that the open space standards were much lower than what were recommended, that the space allocated towards health amenity standards had been reduced, the space allocated towards education amenities had been reduced. So do we know whether this DP does a better job of quality of life for Mumbaikars?
It's tough to say unless we have, unless it's tough to talk about that at this. It's too early. But I mean, the point that they published saying that they haven't reduced open spaces, for example, right? So I really don't know. I mean, my whole point about open spaces is the following: it should actually be usable for the people who live here, right? I got Lita's plans to bring a soccer tournament, so I just came. But I mean, it's AstroTurf, right? So now
and we've seen a lot of those crop up in the last few years.
So I mean, but the point is that I grew up playing cricket in whatever Oval Maidan and places like that, right? There's no water, there's a dust bowl. So I mean, it's all great to say 16 pitches, 20 pitches, but I mean, there's enough open space for us if we just maintain them nicely and people are encouraged to go and actually play in those open spaces, right?
Is there enough open space? Are you worried that this DP doesn't do it? Because the earlier one faced a lot of
so that's what I'm saying, the earlier DP.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, do you encourage your children to go and use the Oval Maidan?
I mean, it's so far away. So yeah.
I'm just giving an example. I mean, other than
you do have to be privileged and living in Churchgate to do that.
No, not at all.
I do have a very serious point to make there. They're talking about affordable housing. Affordable open spaces becomes a question over here, because those AstroTurfs and some of these grounds cost 6,000-7,000 rupees for an hour. Oval Maidan was free all through.
Even some of the clubs, when we mentioned Goregaon, I mean, Goregaon Sports Club is one of the biggest areas, but unless you're not paying a premium membership fee, it's not accessible at all.
Is it available to all?
It's only for a few elite.
Are we elitists to be talking about all of this at a time when half the city, 40% or more of the citizens, people living in the city actually live in slums?
I mean, the size of this table, there are people, there are 10 people at places staying in the size of this table where we are said the people.
So my question is, are we doing what needs to be done for all of those people? Do we have any idea whether this DP does justice to them in terms of green spaces, open spaces, any of that?
See, what happens is, that's what I keep saying, that a healthy digestive system is essential for our functioning. I mean, if so the administration or your quality of management is like your digestive system. So if you're going to throw in more FSI, but your administration does not improve, you're just going to have an upset stomach. So it's just it's a simple thing. I mean, it's your existing standards of administration in no way behove confidence that it will.
Let's see if Ronita has a view
Mr.
on this.
Nitin Curry should be answering some of this.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, he was short on time, so he only stayed on to tell me that you should have read the document, except that the document is not available. So I'm not sure what to read. Ronita, do you have a better understanding whether this DP will actually do justice to the issue of green spaces and open spaces in Mumbai, including space allocation for education amenities, health amenities, etc.? Or should we all be as set to be disappointed as with the earlier version of DP 2034?
I think there has been very little amendments, and I am not very happy with how the green space allocation has been dealt with, and it definitely does not do justice if we call a social justice, which we were just now discussing, that are these green spaces accessible? Until unless these green spaces are accessible, they are to a human scale, then you do not enjoy that green space. Okay, you'll have that ecosystem service available, but even the livability quotient of the city becomes a questionable factor. Even I will also come back to another question which you said, are we doing justice? No, in terms of where 40%, more than 40%, actually it's more around 52% population living in low income settlements or slums. If you see the the DCR, there are special provisions in DCR for slum rehabilitation, and these 40% population who are resource constrained, and their densification has been done with very little consideration to open spaces, and that is my primary concern. If you go to these rehabilitation colonies, the distance between the buildings have been reduced, which is a concern in terms of open spaces, in terms of even the ecosystem service in each open space provides. I am not even talking about daylight and ventilation and associated health hazards that can bring if you have an absence of a green space or a daylight or a ventilated space.
Okay, fair enough.
Two new points. There's a fight which I've been having for 4 years with the municipal corporation. At Observer Research Foundation, I came up with a report as well. Look at the accessibility of open spaces. Most of our gardens, 900 or 1,000 of them in the city, close at 10 a.m. in the morning and are closed till 4 p.m. And then they open at 4 p.m. and go on up till 9 p.m. I'm saying this is the most absurd, ridiculous thing. One says that per capita space requirement is less, and then on a temporal scale, time-wise, you shrunk away 6 hours. Imagine, and one of the best examples is Horniman Circle. It's such a pleasant sight. That's the only garden which is open. People who are salesmen, moving staff, come there, sleep, have their lunch, take a nap for 15 minutes.
I must admit, I know that this is critical to the development of the city, but it almost sounds like a luxurious problem to have.
No,
the
but
these are shut in the afternoon hours,
so
as opposed to all the other critical issues we are facing.
It's a simple decision. The municipal commissioner has to say that all public parks will be open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. and they're not able to do that.
Okay.
That will improve accessibility. Second is walkability. Your biggest public space is actually your roads and streets, and walkability is such a poor experience in this city. So you don't need to do anything extra. You just need to improve your sidewalks, and suddenly your experience of living in the city improves, because people don't have time to go to Oval Maidan or go to a neighboring park, but they are always moving. From here I have to go to the nearest railway station, get down, go somewhere, and if that experience of moving in the city improves, then suddenly things improve without doing any significant infrastructure additions, etc.
Okay, so I think we're down to the last few minutes that we have. One of the urban planners I was talking to, and I asked him, I said, what do you make of this DP? And he said, how do I give you an answer, because this is the executive summary and the report is missing. So I understand that we've been discussing this for a while now without having the full details, and I believe that they will become available only over the next several days, and even then it'll take us time to analyze. But when you look at what they've identified as the key goals, and how they're going about it, the provisions they made for affordable housing, do you feel more optimistic about this DP than you did about the earlier version of this?
I think I do, because the earlier one also had those points about making RA as a new growth center. I think we've been able to. So from a very limited point, yes. The FSI seemed to be, yes, from 8, I think that was now to 5, and so it's spreading. So there are a lot of riders now. So I do feel there have been some improvements, definitely, yeah.
Okay, Rohit, you look at this and you think of opportunity to build more, to be able to sell more, or do you believe that it's still very limited in scope?
I mean, we're an affordable housing developer, so in our whole model is to basically build in the periphery and build, build a township that actually has.
So 10 lakh homes is doable? That's the goal of this DP.
I mean, I think it's too early to tell. I mean, I would have.
Why? They've said that 10 lakh homes, they're opening up 3,355 hectares from no development zones, another 300 more from the salt pan land, of which about 2,000 odd hectares will be used for affordable housing.
I mean,
and
it sounds fantastic, but the devil's in the detail, right? So let's just wait for a few days.
So what are you worried that the detail may carry that, might not make this as promising as it seems?
I mean, there are too many things to, just air in 2 minutes. But the fact of the matter is that we have no idea where these pieces of land are, what the social infrastructure is, can people actually get there, what the soil
That's the
conditions are
question
like.
asked,
You know,
yeah.
there are lots of things to to consider before.
What's most interesting is that we have an activist and a developer sharing some of those views.
They keep nodding together.
I do, and these are some of his
When
points
does
as
that
well.
ever happen
I find that
otherwise?
very interesting, and I'm going to take that point also to Ronita. Ronita, just in terms of what Menaka was saying, in terms of the previous development plan and its current rendition, do you think, well, if there were a couple of things that you think, any lessons that could be learned from, well, foreign cities or other countries?
See, densification is not a new thing, and a lot of very good cities where livability quotient is very high. We can see Singapore, we can also see Hong Kong. They have very stringent norms in terms of, because they have to go high rise. And in Hong Kong, you know what high rise means. It's not just G plus 10 or G plus 20. It might be 30, 40 years. It's very high, these high rises, but they have very stringent norm in terms of providing quality of life to the inhabitants. So these are stringent norms that are not derived just as just offhand values. These are derived from very well scientifically calibrated values, and I feel this DP does open up, the new version does open up for these kind of discussions where you can have more innovation in terms of not just having an affordable housing, but an housing which is livable, and that livability you can actually measure. And I feel this DP does, the new version DP does open up these kind of discussions and also these kind of opportunities, which I really like. But yeah, probably you can never be happy with and want everything at the same time. We are going through a transition, and in this transition you need open up land for development. There have been innumerable urban planning tools that have been adopted to open up lands for development. And I also feel when government is using words like affordable housing, rehabilitation housing, these words have a very significant meaning. It doesn't just mean that you are going to rehouse a person or give a shelter to a person. Rehabilitation has a lot of connotation. It means a vertical upliftment in terms of livability. When you're giving affordability, is just not what also Menaka said, that it's just not the value of the house. It's the how when you live. It's the living cost. It's the day-to-day cost that you spend when you live in that house. So if you're moved away from your from your workplace, your livelihood is at stake, then that house remains livable at all. So I think with this DP there are a few things I am quite it seems good that they have taken the recommendations from the people and they have changed the DP to modify the DP to some extent. But this DP does show a lot of opportunities in terms of innovation. So you might not have very large houses. We might have very small tiny units where a family of 4 can stay and yet stay very comfortably. If you see Tokyo, is the very dense city and extremely dense city, and their houses are not small. Their houses are not as big as houses which we see here in India. They are taller. The buildings are taller, and yeah, the housing units where a family size of 4 can stay can be as small as 265 to 300 square meter, which is 300 square feet, which is a kind of a livable, if you see in terms of Tokyo standards, if you see in terms of Manhattan standards. If those cities have been able to utilize the FSI as a very important tool to create livable spaces through very well designed buildings,
Let's hope that
I
Mumbai
feel
is able to
Mumbai
do so
is
as
in
well.
that path.
Yeah, fair point. I have one last question. Can I get to ask it to Mayur? And I know this is a question that all of our viewers will be asking. We have some other questions, but unfortunately, since we don't have more details on the DP, I'm not taking them because I don't know what authority we have to answer them. But the one question everybody will be asking is, will it become cheaper to buy a house in Mumbai, whether it's in the island city or the suburbs? Mayur, do you believe that this plan to build 10 lakh affordable homes, this plan to increase FSI, in the existing island city and in suburban Mumbai, will all help in bringing property prices down in Mumbai?
Definitely, I think in a long run, because if you look at the previous DP, we were not utilizing the land potential in the optimized manner. We were utilizing for the slum, if it 3 FSI, for cluster it is 4 FSI. Now the FSI across the board has been increased a little bit, but I think that will give a very big boost in a long run to create a larger affordable stock, housing stock. Another thing is this NDZ thing. If I recollect in earlier, whatever the published DP, the 1/3 of the land will be created as a open land recreational space for the city. And on the balance land only, you are going to create affordable housing stock. So whatever those hectares of land which are NDZ land will bring also open space to the city. And affordable housing focus of creating a smaller flats of what the Ronita said of 30 square meter or 40 square meter will definitely have ticket size of below 75 lakhs or below 1 crore. You should be able to afford those affordable housing in the NDZs which are going to get developed specifically as an affordable housing zones.
Okay, I know he promised open spaces, or he said the earlier DP did. That's what they said when Lower Parel developed as well. I can't find a single open space. We've got 30 seconds.
Very quickly, the affordable housing solution is not just about NDZ land. It's about decongesting open spaces and speeding up development, right? So you have a slum policy, you've got a MHADA policy, you've got the PMAY scheme, and this. So it's all of these combined along with the periphery of Mumbai.
Okay.
So all of these act together.
Okay, are you going to read out the viewer comment we got, or should I read it out?
Please,
the one that made
please
you
go
laugh.
ahead. No, please go ahead.
Okay, so Vishal Mehta says, great plan on paper, wonderful dream selling. Only problem is none of us will be alive to see it. I think that's a good note to end this discussion on. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. Ronita, thanks very much.
In the long run, we are all dead,
joining
right?
us. That's potentially what the new Mumbai will look like. But we will await more details and come back to you with more discussions on this in the days to come. Thanks for watching Primetime.